1965. Motown is running like a machine. Stax is cutting records out of an old movie theater in Memphis, and Chess is about to release a song people will argue over for the next 60 years. Every track on this list is a real, verified radio-dominating R&B hit from that one year. We're counting down the 12 biggest R&B single of the entire decade. Let's get into it. Number 12. The Impressions. People Get Ready. 1965.
I do believe I want to tell you this.
At number 12, People Get Ready by The Impressions. Curtis Mayfield wrote this song, and he wrote it from church. He said the imagery came straight from his upbringing, from gospel songs about trains bound for glory, and from a deep, almost prayerful mood he was sitting in when the words came together. Released in 1965, it climbed to number 3 on the R&B chart and became one of the most quietly powerful records of the decade. But here's what makes this song different from almost anything else on this list. Martin Luther King Jr. himself named it the unofficial anthem of the civil rights movement. He used it to calm marchers, to steady them before they walked into danger, to comfort them afterward. Chicago churches started swapping lyrics into their own services. The imagery of a train with no need for a ticket, just faith, connected straight back to the Underground Railroad, a code Black Americans had been singing for over a century.
I tell you, there ain't no room.
Curtis Mayfield didn't shout his politics. He whispered them, wrapped in gospel harmony, and somehow that made the message hit even harder. Bob Marley loved this song so much, he built One Love around its verses just months after it came out.
Come on, everybody, join in.
The song peaked at number 3 on the R&B chart and number 14 on the pop side. Modest numbers for a record that would go on to outlive almost everything else on the radio that year. It's been inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame, preserved by the Library of Congress in the National Recording Registry, and Rolling Stone has ranked it among the greatest songs ever recorded, period. Not just from 1965. Aretha Franklin covered it. Rod Stewart and Jeff Beck covered it. Dozens of artists have tried to capture what Mayfield did in 3 minutes. People Get Ready isn't the loudest song on this list, but it might be the one that mattered most. Number 11. Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, The Tracks of My Tears, 1965. At number 11, The Tracks of My Tears by Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. This one starts with a guitar riff so famous, musicians still study it today. It came from Miracles guitarist Marv Tarplin, who built the melody after listening to Harry Belafonte's Banana Boat Song. Tarplin brought Smokey the music on a cassette tape, and then Smokey sat on it for 6 months. He couldn't find the words. Then one day it clicked. Take a good look at my face. You'll see my smile looks out of place. A song about a man smiling on the outside while he's completely broken on the inside. When Smokey played the finished version for Motown boss Berry Gordy, Gordy told him bluntly, "You buried your hook, man. Bring it up. Repeat it till you wear it out." Smokey listened. The song hit number 2 on the R&B chart, sold over 1 million copies, and decades later, Rolling Stone would call it the single greatest Motown song ever recorded, out of thousands of contenders. Linda Ronstadt covered it. Aretha Franklin covered it. Johnny Rivers took his version into the Pop Top 10 in 1967. It was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame and preserved by the Library of Congress. And there's an even stranger footnote. The Who's Pete Townsend was so struck by the way Smokey delivered the word substitute elsewhere in his catalog that it directly inspired him to write an entire song called Substitute. Interestingly, the record barely made a dent when it first hit British shelves in 1965, but when Motown reissued it in the UK 4 years later, it finally climbed into the top 10 there too. But nobody has ever topped that original ache in Smokey's voice, or that guitar line that still gives people chills before he even sings a word. Number 10, The Righteous Brothers, You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin', 1965. At number 10, You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin' by the Righteous Brothers. Bill Medley and Bobby Hatfield were a blue-eyed soul duo who found themselves in the hands of producer Phil Spector and his legendary wall of sound, layers and layers of instruments, all crammed together into one thick, towering wave of noise. Written by Barry Mann, Cynthia Weil, and Spector himself, the song opens with Bill Medley's voice sitting so low, so intimate, it sounds like he's singing directly into your ear in a dark room. Then it builds and builds until Bobby Hatfield's voice comes crashing in on top of that wall of sound like the whole record is about to break apart. It shot to number 1 on the pop charts in early 1965 and dominated radio airwaves across every format, pop, R&B, and beyond, for months. It's the number that still stuns people. Decades later, the performing rights organization BMI crunched the numbers and named it the most played song on American radio in the entire 20th century. Not just 1965. The entire record hit number 1 on the pop charts and stayed there for 2 weeks. And it did it using a production trick most artists at the time simply didn't have access to. Spector's wall of sound, stacking multiple pianos, multiple guitars, and a full horn and string section into one dense, cavernous mix, all crammed onto a single track. It's been covered by artists across every genre since, from Cilla Black to Hall & Oates. But the original has never been dethroned. One recording session, one towering wall of sound, and a legacy that outlasted almost every other song ever pressed onto vinyl. Number 9, Marvin Gaye, I'll Be Doggone, 1965. At number 9, I'll Be Doggone by Marvin Gaye. Smokey Robinson wrote this one specifically for Marvin, working alongside fellow Miracle Pete Moore and guitarist Marv Tarplin, whose riff on this track hits like a hook straight out of a rock and roll record. Robinson originally offered the song to the Temptations first, and they turned it down. Motown's loss became Marvin Gaye's gain. When Marvin got hold of it, Smokey said he Marvinized the song completely, reworking it in ways nobody expected. I loved producing Marvin Gaye, Smokey later said. He'd interpret my material like he'd written it himself. The lyrics play with clever wordplay. Marvin promising his woman he won't be doggone, he'll be long gone if she ever steps out on him.
100 years old, if you ever let that...
The song became Marvin's first million-selling record and his very first number 1 hit on the R&B chart, holding the top spot for 2 weeks and climbing all the way to number 8 on the pop side. Up until this point, Marvin had been trying to be a crooner, chasing a Sinatra-style sound that just wasn't connecting. The backing on this record reads like a who's who of Motown's funk brothers: James Jamerson on bass, Benny Benjamin on drums, Earl Van Dyke on keys, with the Miracles themselves stacked up on background vocals behind Marvin. Smokey didn't stop there either. He immediately turned around and wrote Marvin's follow-up hit too, Ain't That Peculiar, which also shot into the pop top 10 that same year. This was the record that convinced Marvin, and convinced Motown, that his real power lived in soul music. Without I'll Be Doggone, there might never have been a What's Going On. Number 8, Martha and the Vandellas, Nowhere to Run, 1965. At number 8, Nowhere to Run by Martha and the Vandellas. Written and produced by Motown's legendary Holland Dozier Holland team, this track hit with a massive driving sound. The Funk Brothers even slapped actual snow chains on the studio floor to get that extra percussive stomp underneath the tambourines and drums. But it's the music video, yes, an actual music video, filmed a full decade before MTV existed, that made this song legendary. In June of 1965, Martha Reeves, Betty Kelly, and Rosalind Ashford were filmed singing live, walking straight through the Ford Motor Company's River Rouge assembly plant in Detroit, weaving between actual workers, building brand new Ford Mustangs on the line. Ford refused to shut the plant down for the shoot. Demand for the Mustang was too high, so the Vandellas performed right in the middle of a working factory floor. Martha Reeves later called it the first music video ever made, a claim that historians still debate, but the moment itself is undeniably real, undeniably filmed, and undeniably historic. The song itself climbed to number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100, and Rolling Stone would later rank it among the 500 greatest songs ever recorded. It's shown up in the soundtracks of Good Morning Vietnam, The Warriors, Crimson Tide, and Baby Driver, decades after its release, still finding new audiences. And the timing of that factory shoot wasn't an accident either. This was Motor City, built in large part by black auto workers, at the exact moment the Civil Rights Movement and the Voting Rights Act were reshaping the entire country. Nowhere to Run wasn't just a hit song. It was Detroit, captured on film, at the height of its power. Number 7, Fontella Bass, Rescue Me, 1965. At number 7, Rescue Me by Fontella Bass. Here's a fact that still trips people up 60 years later. This song is, to this day, one of the most commonly misidentified recordings in music history. Ask a room full of people who sings it, and half of them will confidently say, Aretha Franklin. They're wrong. Aretha didn't even release her breakout hit until nearly 2 years after this record came out. Fontella Bass grew up the daughter of gospel singer Martha Bass, a longtime member of the Clare Award Singers, and she brought every ounce of that church power into this record, recorded at Chess Studios in Chicago in just 3 takes, with a young Maurice White on drums. Years before he'd go on to found Earth, Wind & Fire, Rescue Me exploded up the charts, spending 4 straight weeks at number 1 on the R&B chart, and becoming Chess Records' first million-selling single since Chuck Berry, a full decade earlier. Despite co-writing the song herself, Fontella didn't get proper songwriting credit at first. It took over 20 years and a legal fight before she got her due. The song climbed to number 4 on the pop chart and even reached number 11 in the UK, an impressive crossover for a Chess Records single at the time. It went on to have an odd second life decades later too. The melody was reworked for a Pizza Hut commercial in the early 90s, sung by none other than Aretha Franklin herself, the exact artist people kept confusing her with. Rock critic Dave Marsh summed up Fontella's vocal on this track perfectly, calling it, quote, the best non-Aretha Aretha ever. That says everything you need to know. Number 6, J.R. Walker and the All-Stars, Shotgun, 1965. At number 6, Shotgun by Junior Walker and the All-Stars. This one is basically one big happy accident from start to finish. That famous shotgun blast sound effect that opens the record? Not a gun at all. It's guitarist Eddie Willis accidentally kicking his amplifier, heavily echoed and pumped up in the mix until it sounded exactly like gunfire. And then there's Junior Walker's vocal. Walker, real name Autry DeWalt, was a saxophone player, not a singer. But on the day of the session, the vocalist who was actually booked to sing the track never showed up. So Walker stepped up to the mic himself, purely as a placeholder, fully expecting Motown to bring in someone else and re-record it properly later. Producer Barry Gordy heard the rough take and decided Walker's raw, gritty vocal was too good to replace. That accidental vocal, paired with Walker's own wailing saxophone, shot straight to number 1 on the R&B chart and all the way to number 4 on the pop side. The song itself was inspired by a dance craze Walker watched happening on the floor of a Michigan nightclub, where dancers mimed firing guns at each other as they moved across the floor.
We're gonna break it down, baby, now.
The band performed it everywhere that year: American Bandstand, Shindig, where the action is. And in one of music history's stranger coincidences, a then unknown guitarist named Jimi Hendrix, touring at the time as a backing musician for Little Richard, performed Shotgun on a Nashville television broadcast that same summer, years before anyone knew his name. The track was later inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. What started as a missing singer and a kicked amplifier became one of Motown's rawest, most explosive hits of the entire decade.
I said, shotgun.
Number 5. Wilson Pickett, In the Midnight Hour, 1965. At number 5, In the Midnight Hour by Wilson Pickett. Atlantic Records had a problem. Wilson Pickett wasn't charting, so they sent him south to Stax Studios in Memphis to work with guitarist Steve Cropper and the label's legendary house band. Pickett and Cropper met at the Lorraine Motel, the very same motel where, 3 years later, Dr. King would be assassinated, and in one single evening, they wrote this song together in a hotel room. The title came from something Cropper remembered Pickett singing on old gospel recordings, a phrase about seeing Jesus in the midnight hour. Cropper flipped it into something a lot more secular, recorded on May 12, 1965, with the entire band playing live in one take, no overdubs, inside a repurposed movie theater that Stax used as its studio. The song shot straight to number 1 on the R&B chart within weeks of release. Guitarist Steve Cropper remembered the explosion that followed. It was so big, you'd walk into any club in any city, and the house band would already be playing it. Nearly 60 years later, In the Midnight Hour is still one of the most covered soul songs ever recorded, by the Grateful Dead, by Bruce Springsteen, by Roxy Music. The single sold over 1 million copies, earning Pickett a gold record and his first ever Grammy nomination for Best Rhythm and Blues Recording. In 2017, the Library of Congress selected the original recording for preservation in the National Recording Registry, officially recognizing it as culturally and historically significant to the country. It also kicked off an incredible run for Pickett at Stax. That same year alone, he followed it with 634, 5789, and Don't Fight It, cementing Memphis as his musical home. It launched Wilson Pickett from a struggling singer into soul music's most electric performer. Number 4. The Supremes, Stop, In the Name of Love, 1965. Written by the Motown hit machine, Holland Dozier Holland, this song actually came from a very real, very personal argument. Songwriter Lamont Dozier had just been caught cheating by his girlfriend, and in the middle of trying to talk his way out of it, the words just tumbled out of him. Baby, please stop, in the name of love, before you break my heart. He walked straight into the studio and turned his own excuse into one of the biggest hits of the decade. But it's the choreography that turned this song into an icon. Right before the Supremes were set to perform it live on British television, they were rehearsing backstage when Paul Williams and Melvin Franklin of The Temptations watched them run through it, and on the spot, suggested the now legendary stop hand gesture, one palm up like a traffic cop, straight into the camera. Diana Ross, Mary Wilson, and Florence Ballard debuted the move days later, and it became instantly, permanently associated with the song. Stop, In the Name of Love, hit number 1 on the pop charts, held it for 2 weeks, and reached number 2 on the R&B chart, making the Supremes the first act in Billboard history to score 4 consecutive number 1 singles. They'd extend that streak to 5 just months later with Back in My Arms Again. The song earned a Grammy nomination in 1966 and was later inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame, cementing its place as one of the defining records of the entire Motown catalog. One hallway rehearsal, one suggested hand movement, one of the most recognizable pieces of choreography in music history. Listen, 90% of you watching these videos right now ain't subscribed yet. If these stories are blowing your mind, imagine what you're missing. Hit subscribe, turn on that bell, and join the R&B fans who never miss a Groove Lens upload. Number 3. James Brown, Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, 1965. At number 3, Papa's Got a Brand New Bag by James Brown. This is the record where soul music quietly became something else entirely. James Brown and his band built the entire song around a single, relentless idea, put all the emphasis on the first beat of every single measure. Musicians call it playing on the one. Before this record, almost nobody was building songs that way. After it, everybody was. The result doesn't sound like a typical love song or dance tune from 1965. It sounds like a machine. Tight horns, a driving guitar riff, and Brown's voice cutting through it all like he's directing traffic. It spent 8 full weeks at number 1 on the R&B chart, becoming James Brown's first true crossover smash, climbing to number 8 on the pop charts, and it won him his very first Grammy Award for Best Rhythm and Blues Recording. Music historians now point to this exact record as the true birth of funk as its own distinct sound. Years before Sly Stone, years before Parliament Funkadelic, years before the word funk was even commonly used to describe music at all. In 1999, the original 1965 recording was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame, formally recognizing it as one of the most important recordings in American music history. Decades later, hip-hop producers would return to this exact record again and again, sampling its rhythm section to build entirely new songs on top of it. James Brown didn't follow a trend on this record. He built the blueprint that a whole genre would spend the next decade following. Number 2. The Temptations, My Girl, 1965. At number 2, My Girl by The Temptations. Smokey Robinson wrote this song as a direct male counterpart to his earlier hit, My Guy, which he'd written for Mary Wells. He wanted to capture that exact same warmth, that exact same devotion, but told from a man's point of view for the very first time. When he brought the song to The Temptations, the group was still searching. They'd had some success, but they hadn't had their true breakout moment yet. Then David Ruffin opened his mouth. His lead vocal on this track is warm, plain-spoken, almost conversational, like he's talking directly to the one person in the world who matters to him, and it stood out immediately from the group's earlier, more polished doo-wop-style singles. That famous opening bass line, followed by Ruffin's easy, glowing delivery, made My Girl the group's very first number 1 hit on both the pop and the R&B charts simultaneously. The song was co-written by Smokey Robinson alongside fellow Miracle Ronald White, recorded in Detroit in the closing weeks of 1964, and released just in time to climb to the top of both charts in early 1965. More than that, it became Motown's first ever number 1 pop hit, fronted entirely by a male group. Decades later, it inspired an entire feature film named after it, and it remains one of the most licensed songs in the Motown catalog, showing up in commercials, movies, and wedding playlists every single year. It's simple, it's sincere, and it turned The Temptations, overnight, from a promising Motown act into the label's flagship male group. Number 1. The Four Tops, I Can't Help Myself, Sugar Pie Honey Bunch, 1965.
In and out my life.
And at number 1, the single biggest R&B song of the entire year, 1965, I Can't Help Myself, Sugar Pie Honey Bunch, by the Four Tops. This song came from one of the most unexpected places imaginable, songwriter Lamont Dozier's childhood memory of his own grandfather. Dozier grew up watching his grandfather flirt harmlessly with his grandmother outside her home beauty shop, calling every woman who walked by Sugar Pie and Honey Bunch. Decades later, sitting at a piano at Motown, that exact memory came flooding back, and the entire song poured out almost instantly. Here's the twist. Lead singer Levi Stubbs actually hated this song at first. He thought the lyrics were too sweet, too sugary, and he begged producer Brian Holland to let him re-record his vocal the next day. Holland promised him they would. They never did. That very first take, the one Stubbs wasn't even happy with, is the one that got released. The result was a song so infectious that, according to the studio engineer, people were literally banging on the studio door while it was being recorded, desperate to know what that sound was. I Can't Help Myself spent 9 consecutive weeks at number 1 on the R&B chart, the longest run of any song that entire year, and also hit number 1 on the pop charts for 2 weeks. Interestingly, the song's melody and chord progression are almost identical to the Supremes' earlier hit, Where Did Our Love Go?, also written by the same Holland-Dozier-Holland team. Billboard would later officially rank it as the single biggest R&B record of 1965, and it's since been inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame alongside the group's other classic, Reach Out I'll Be There, one grandfather's flirty catchphrase, one reluctant lead singer, one take. That's the story behind the number 1 R&B song of 1965.
I'm a fool.